This is the Monroe County Board of Commissioners work session for September 13th, 2023. Again, I'll note for the record that all three commissioners are present in the Nat U Hill Room. We have two items, I believe, on today's work session, and I'd like to start with Jeff Cockrell. You have an item for us with DLZ, I believe.
Yes, and again, this is one where I'm not expecting a vote. It's kind of a big contract, and Scott Carnegie from DLZ is here, and we talked about doing this next week, but he's not going to be in town next week, so we thought we'd at least have one option where he was here in person. He'll probably try to attend by Zoom next week, but he's building jail, so it's kind of hard to do. What I have before you and what I emailed you last night is kind of the draft at this point of the contract with DLZ to perform the professional service in connection with the new jail project. We kind of went over this once earlier. It still contemplates a construction manager as well, and that construction manager will not be performing work on the project. So we went to the council and nobody had any concerns with moving that direction. So that's included. It includes all the steps that were in the previous ones, everything from design through construction. It also includes some pre-design services, and we've broken those out a little bit in how the cost is calculated on this. Typically for these types of projects, your engineer design services plus your construction management services are less than 10%, somewhere between 7 and 10% for the total of the two. So we've kind of worked down their percentage fee so that we think we can have that enough space to get closer to 7 than the 10%. So, but we did that a couple of different ways. One is within that 7 to 10%, we typically don't include pre-design services, kind of the master planning and some of those services that we're also looking at them doing. So those costs are broken out, and I think they're at a not to exceed for the jail. It's $155,000, and then for the justice complex, it would be $160,000. And I might have those two numbers transposed, but they're close. So for those services, we would be paying that amount. For the cost of construction, this is set at a 4.5% of the construction cost would be their fee. So that's kind of been the big thing we've been going back and forth over recently. So otherwise, it's kind of the standard form agreement that we typically see with moderate size construction projects. This is just kind of a bigger project than we've ever done before. It would allow, if the county chose to do both the jail and the co-location at the same time. And I think you've also received the memo that, the estimated cost to do both is $150 million, with essentially 75 being the cost for the jail and 75 being for the cost of the other facility. So, that's kind of not a secret at this point. So I wanted to make sure that's why this says the cost is between 70 and 150 for the construction project. If you have any questions for me, I'm more than happy to answer them. If you have any questions for Scott, again, more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, take a look at it. If you have any questions in the next week, let me know, but I would hope to get this on your agenda for next week so that we can continue to move forward with this, because I think they need to begin their programming work so that we have a better understanding of, how much space we really need and what kind of our options for services. And I think it'd be nice to have that kind of stuff nailed down. I also think the next step is, once we get this contract in place, then we start looking for a construction manager. And so we want to begin that process fairly soon. I was at Monday's JFAC meeting, and Councilmember Iverson really wanted to have all the construction stuff, or his, I'm not sure but his diagram had all the design and essentially ready to bid next fall. And that is a huge task. And so I'm not sure how realistic that is, but I also, kind of want to keep the momentum going.
Questions or comments?
I'm just glad to see us moving on to this step.
Just for clarity's sake, this initial $315,000 is really in an effort to understand if this land is viable for construction, right? Or is this not the pre-engineering? Because we are not moving forward until we talk to the community, until we know whether this particular land is viable, that based on initial engineering studies. Where does that fit in here?
I guess the 315, I think some of that would be looking at the actual site. And if Scott, feel more than welcome to come up if I answer this incorrectly, right? Some of that will go towards, actually looking at the ground and things. I think a bigger portion of that is actually looking at what we're doing, how we're operating, and working with our departments to kind of figure out, when we master plan something, we want to know how much space. So I think a lot of that is dealing with those kind of issues, dealing with our departments.
Which is transferable to any
Correct.
location. Thank you. Yeah.
Correct. So it's more of
Yeah.
the playbook and then finding the field later.
Right.
Yeah, so Julie, I think what you may be referring to is the environmental and the geotech, which I think Jeff is handling that outside the scope of DLZ. The pre-designed services that Jeff has been speaking of, it really consists of programming, which there was considerable discussion at the Monday night JFAC meeting regarding programming, conceptual design, and master planning. The programming is when we meet with the various departments and we really begin to have the conversation to see what their space needs are. And that really then begins to define the scope of a potential project. Then we translate that written program to a conceptual design, and we begin to kind of put it on a site and do master planning. And that's really what the pre-designed services are.
So we are not committing to a particular piece of property at this moment, but obviously we need to do so soon.
And you hit the nail on the head. Those pre-designed services, they're transferable to any site. It's the first step that really has to be done.
Okay.
And I think maybe this will help the public and everyone. I think during my conversations with DLZ, that is about a 2-month process, 2 to 3 months to do that programming analysis. So it's not committing any site today, but it is, hopefully in 2 to 3 months, we'll have a lot better idea of where we're going.
And I will note as well for the public that each step along the way in the next phases we don't move to the next step until we have approval on the previous step. And so, and I know that Mr. Cockrell's raised this before, so.
But it's written into the cover sheet that we have too. And I'd like to point out that this isn't, when we talk about the cost of the jail, it's the cost of the jail and the sheriff's offices, because that actually has a separate function.
That is correct. It's the sheriff's office and jail.
Right.
But then also the potential justice campus.
Right. But when we
determining
talk
where
about the
that
jail
goes, whether it's,
building,
yes,
yeah,
right.
it's not just the
Right.
jail, it's also
Right.
just that one facility. So,
Right.
yeah, the other items are separate.
Yeah, and that's going to be up to the council, and I wish we had some information on that from them about whether they intend to try to do both at once or whether they don't, because that will impact the processes of for the sheriff's department a great deal. So
It impacts the staffing that the sheriff's office has to have. It also, clearly, if we build everything at once, it reduces overall costs because you're not moving equipment back and forth and people back and forth.
And that was pointed out pretty clearly
safer.
Monday night as well.
Yeah, it's safer to do all of this at once if we can.
Yes.
And I would like to maybe beat the dead horse one more time.
Please.
We're looking at the Thompson site, we're doing geotech, we're doing environmental, and we're looking at purchasing a piece of property to access property we already own, right? In my mind, I don't want people to think it's off the table or not, but no matter what we use that property for, this information will be important, right? I think we've owned that property for over 20 years, and so whatever purpose we put it for, having that access is going to be important. Knowing the geotechnical information is going to be important, and knowing the environmental is going to be important.
Yeah.
So that is also somewhat independent of the final decision on a lot of that work. And I just kind of want to make sure that that's clear.
I guess, just to clarify my question, maybe. As we're getting back that information about the land, the environmental, the engineering, pre-engineering studies, et cetera, for viability, that dovetails with the deadline and the work process for the pre-design, yes? In other words, you're going to take that information into account. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the environmental and the geotech that's going to be very useful for us
Okay.
as we determine the viability of that Thompson site in particular.
Yeah. And where?
And
Because
where,
it
yes.
is, 80 some acres and, where on that site. And that's something that we want to convey to the community as well, and hear back from them as well, because that may also impact siting. So what they tell us, because if there are potentially, for example, 3 places where the jail could ostensibly be placed and sited, that if the community's telling us, oh, we'd really like it here, that we are conveying that to you as well. Because if we have that ability, that would be useful.
Yes, and
Okay.
we've been very mindful of location with regard to the neighbors. And so we want to continue to take that into account. And I know that part, when you showed us the map with an overlay of a building on it, it was not close to where the neighborhoods were. And we have that opportunity, but we have to make sure that that part of the property
Is
is
viable.
feasible.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that map you're referring to, that happened to be a footprint from the Hamilton County Jail.
Right.
And we just put it on there to give some sense of scale.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think that was very helpful. And it's helpful for people who are concerned about the location.
How many beds is the Hamilton County Jail again? Do you remember?
If I can go back to my file back here, I could tell you.
Okay, I'm sorry, it just struck me that,
But my memory is it's about 550.
I thought it was under 6, but more than 400.
Yes.
It's bigger. It's bigger by a percentage. Not by,
My cheat sheet, Hamilton County is 526 rated beds,
okay.
Okay.
and it's 131,773 gross square feet.
And they have a sheriff's office
Yes.
on theirs, yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
And just a point of kind of what started this whole agenda item, talking about our agreement, in conversations with both Jeff and Angie, we rewrote a second draft of our agreement so that you could pivot either way.
Yeah.
If it's just the sheriff's office and jail, or if it's the
Right.
sheriff's office and jail and the whole justice.
Is Jeff, is this gonna come out of the edit ban? Is that the plan?
That is the plan, as long as the edit ban is still exist. Again, at some point, I think that the edit ban is going to be consumed by a larger
Yeah,
bond, right?
but this is 315,000. this
I,
first
I
part.
think the edit ban, again, I'm trying to keep the confusion to a minimum.
I'm trying
The
to
edit-
add to
The
it.
edit ban can absorb this because the edit ban includes over $10 million.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
When we spend money out of this edit ban, if we pivot to I'm just going to use the old floor as an example.
Uh-huh.
I don't think anybody's talking about that right now. But if we would pivot back to that as being the location, then we'd have to figure out how to bridge that funding
Right.
gap from what we spent
Right.
below that number.
Right.
So this has plenty of funding to fund this. And depending on which site we choose and the cost of that site, it may have enough funding in it to fund the entire amount of this contract.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions here? Thank you, Mr. Carnegie, for joining us today. Okay, so then we have another item on our work session, and that's about the government holidays for 2024.
You want me to handle that?
Sure, and I've got two different things going on with the resolution. On our work session, it says 2024-27 instead of 2023.
Right,
But
yeah,
on,
it
a
should be.
yeah. So would you like to go ahead and introduce this?
Sure.
Tell us what we're
This
doing.
is just some housekeeping, and this is something that our handy dandy and ever so on the spots of doing things, Ms. Delata Myers has put together for you guys. And it's just the proposed county holiday schedule for next year. It does include one additional day, and that's April 8th, because of the eclipse that's going to be in town. And so we're proposing that you consider that.
It's like it's not coming to town and getting off a bus. It's going to be, yeah.
Yeah, it's not
It
coming to
is,
town,
yes.
it's
There's
going
gonna
to
be a lot
impact
of
us.
people coming to town to
Yes.
see this. Yes.
Yes.
So, I believe MCCSC has already canceled class for next year. so,
Yeah.
on that date. So we went
Yes.
ahead and included it.
And it looks like you would like input on, because the Christmas Day holidays on a Wednesday in 2024, that we should pick either the day before or the day after as the day off for the holiday. It looks like we're being asked to pick one of those two.
I actually didn't look at this ahead of time. So if Christmas is on a Wednesday, then Tuesday's going to be Christmas Eve. So then you're looking, I don't know what the question is.
She wrote down both holidays and said this one or this one.
She said either the day before Christmas or the day after Christmas as potential holiday.
Typically, it would be the day before.
Typically
Yeah,
be the
generally
day
it's
before.
Christmas Eve.
Right.
New
is-
Year's
is-
Eve.
And
New Year's
then,
Eve.
and then Christmas Day.
Yeah,
So I'm not sure.
So I
Yeah.
think it should be both,
Yes.
speaking as a
It should be
county
Tuesday
attorney.
and Wednesday.
And employee.
Both Tuesday and Thursday?
No,
Oh.
I think you should get Christmas
Just
Eve.
Eve
and I
and
think you
Christmas
should
Day.
New
get
Year's Eve is on here too.
Yeah.
New Year's Eve is on
right,
here.
right. That makes it a little easier and more consistent for people as they're planning.
Yeah, that's how we've always
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah.
So
Maybe,
I'm not
maybe
sure
she was
what-
angling for an extra day
I think maybe
off,
she,
you know.
maybe. Yeah.
So that's an extra, so that's 16
Yes, that makes it total of-
holidays because of the solar eclipse.
Correct.
So then that leaves, because we have an election, that means there's 0 floating holidays.
Correct.
Got
We
it.
don't generally have a floating.
No, we don't, but
Yeah.
we've done that in the past with, when we've had like this year,
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. City elections
the
generally.
non-election year. Okay. All right.
So do we have a motion as
No,
to which, or what do we need to do?
Let's just bring it back for a regular session.
With,
on
with Christmas Eve as the chosen.
Yeah.
Chosen
Christmas
day.
Eve.
Tuesday,
24, 25.
Tuesday, Wednesday the following week.
Yeah.
Yep.
That sounds great. Do we have any other items that need to be discussed? Gee, Minnie, what is this?
Sorry. I just want to bring today and get you, I'm going to ask for you to approve this so I can get it forwarded to the state of Indiana. But Monroe County, with accolades to Commissioner Githens, who worked strongly on this, submitted a grant to the state. It was a request for funding and they received $576,000. And this grant is covering a couple of projects, and I wanted to say it's going to run, it goes back in time a little bit because it goes to July 1st of this year, and then to
June
final
30th
date,
of
June 30th,
2025.
2025.
Yeah.
Yep. And so just wanted to bring this to your attention, get you to approve it. I know that you're aware of this grant, but then we'll have it on next week's agenda, just because this is something I think is important for the community here is going to be happening.
You should say what the grant is for.
Grant is for 2 projects. The first project is going to be assisting IRA. It's a harm reduction focused grassroots organization, and it's going to help them with a building and with a vehicle. And the second project is helping our current Monroe County Health Department expand their current harm reduction efforts. And so those are the 2 projects that are in play. And the state has indicated the total of funds. It's a reimbursement grant. So for instance, for the van and the building purchase, it's not to exceed $450,000. And this is a reimbursable grant. So we pay the money up front and then get reimbursed.
And we also had some matching money in there as part of the grant pledge. So from the opioid settlement money that we've already received.
Ah, got it. So,
Yeah, but that has not been appropriated yet.
we have to-
I move approval of the Indiana Department of Health grant for $576,000 for harm reduction to both the Indiana Recovery Alliance and our local health department.
Second.
And so basically, this is your
Thank
authorizing
you.
me
Thank
to
you
sign
for your work.
this.
Do we need an aye?
Thank you for your work.
They do.
Yeah,
Oh,
so-
Well, we need a public comment.
Yes, is there any public comment on trying to increase harm reduction in our community? All those in favor of accepting the grant from the Indiana Department of Health signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Thank you, Ms. Purdy, for bringing that forward.
Thank you, Commissioner Githens.
Yeah.
It was truly a joint effort. Our health department just continues to dig for these things, and I'm really,
That's awesome.
really proud of them. Makes a big difference to work with folks like that. So, do you have anything else, Mr. Cockrell?
I'm just going to get a copy of the grant agreement because I'm working on the agreement with the IRA for their funding, and so I want to make sure I incorporate that.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, with that, we are adjourned. We'll be back next week on September the 20th. Thank you, everyone.